Tutorial we will take a look how we can make this player look for player state of this enemy, and this is the last video of this series of state machine. So if you haven't watched the previous tutorial yet, so I will recommend you to check that out. I will have the link in the description. And before I jump into the coding part, I want to thanks Alex Nadu and Thang Chuang for supporting me on Patreon and unlocking some exclusive benefits. And if you are guys interested, then you can go and check it out. The link available in the description box. And also check out my Udemy courses. I have high quality Udemy courses on my page, on my Udemy page. Also I have the link of this in the description, so make sure you check that out. And without furthering delay, let's dive into this tutorial. Let's make the look for player state of this enemy. Let me explain the logic first. So if this player game object get inside of this attack range of this enemy, we do know this enemy just moving over to detective state, and then when the detect time is over, then charging on our player and then attacking. Let's suppose the enemy is detective state, and immediately this player get outside of that detect range of this enemy. Then this enemy need to move over to look for player state instead of going over to move state. So this enemy need to look for our player. It's need to flip to the right direction, and after some period of time it's need to flip to the left direction, and then right. And once the look for player state is over, and then we can just move over to move state or whatever, depending upon where player is. So let's create a script for that. So we will go to project app, let's right click, basically go over to assets, right click, create mono behavior script, and name it to something like look for player state. And you can see I already created that script over here, you can notice. So I'm gonna open that up by double clicking on it, and we will remove this start and update function. And instead of inheriting from mono behavior, we're gonna inherit from our state class. And now we need to generate the constructor. So let's hold down control full stop, generate constructor, and we also need to override those function. So let's click on generate overrides. We will uncheck equals get hash to string, and then okay. Rest of this function we just gonna use. So what we need to flip our enemy, and we also need the duration between our flip of this enemy. So time between flips, just like that we can call it, or time between turns, just like that. So we're going to create a scriptable objects to holding those data. So those that script just gonna hold the data, like flipping how many flips we want of this enemy, time between flips of our enemy. So let's do that. So we need to create that script. Let's go over to our and also we need the reference inside this look for player state. We need a reference to that class so we can access those parameters. So let's go over to Unity editor, then assets, right click, create, go over to scripting, and then scriptable object script, and name it to something like look for player data, just like that you can name it. I already created that script, and you can notice over here. So I'm gonna open that up by double clicking on it, and I'm gonna remove this. So you're gonna see just like empty class like this, and you have to assign the path where you want to create inside Unity editor inside your project tab. So you can define the path over here. So now we need some parameters. So the first thing I need, how many turns we want to have inside enemy. So we're gonna make a public that will be int, and we can call it total turns. So let's call it total turns, and by default I'm gonna have 2 turns, so I'm gonna set equal to 2. And also we need the duration between our time, between our turns, or time between turns. So let's make a public float, and we can call it time between turns, just like that. And by default I'm gonna set it to something like 0.08 f unit, just like that. And now we're gonna save our script, and let's go over to our look for a player state class. And now we need a reference to that look for player data so we can access this parameter. So let's go over to look for player state, and let's come at the top of our class, and let's create a variable for that. So we're gonna make a protected look for player data, and we can call it look for player data, just like that. And we need to put it inside constructor. Let's put it inside constructor. So we're gonna put it look for player data, and let's call it look for player data, just like that. And now we have to set this. So let's set this dot look for player data, means referencing this one. And now we're gonna set equal to look for player data, which is referencing this look for player data that we created over here inside. We just put it inside our constructor. So now we have the reference, and we have to create some parameters in order to flip our enemy. So the first parameter we will create to just keep track of how many turns we already done, and also we will create a parameter to just keep track of when we did the last turn. So let's make a variable for that. So we're gonna make a protected that will be in, and we can call it something like amount of turns we done. So let's call it amount of turns. Sorry, I'm gonna call it amount of turns, just like that. And also we're gonna create a parameter to just keep track of when we did the last turn of our enemy. So we're gonna make a protected float, and we can call it last turn time, just like that. And also we will create two parameters to just keep track of basically we're gonna create two parameters to flip this enemy as well. And then those parameter we can call it something like, we getting some problem over here. I don't know where. Let's take a quick look. uh, so basically that's fine. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna need one more parameter, two more parameters to just keep track of the time when we done all of the turns. So that is the case. So we're gonna create a protected float, and this parameter we can call it something like is is turn time done, just like that. I'm gonna call it this will be this not gonna be a float parameter. Instead this will be bool parameter to just keep track of the turn that we did. So let's create a bool parameter for this, and we also gonna create one more parameter, and this parameter just gonna keep track of the time when we have done all of the turns of our enemy. So we're gonna create a protected bool, and we can call it is total turns time done, just like that. We can call it, let's name it to turn time, just like this. And now we need to set it when we enter to this state, which is look for player. So we will go over to this enter state function, and over here when we enter to that state we will set amount of turns equal to 0, because when we enter to our look for player state we do know we gonna have 0 turns of our enemy. So that's why we set it to 0. And now we're gonna set the last turn time. When we did the last turn time we're gonna set equal to time dot time, just like that. Means the current time, or we can set it equal to start time. And that we do know that that parameter we created when we enter to that state. So we can set equal to our start time state, just like that. And this parameter we created inside our state class to just keep track of when we enter to a specific state. Or we can just set it to time dot time, or means the current time of our game, just like that. And now we're gonna set our is turn time turn time done equal to false, because when we enter to that state it should be false. And also the is total turns time done also gonna be false, just like that. And now we just set the parameter when we enter to that state. And now what we have to do, we need to flip our enemy. To flip our enemy, let's get over to this logic update function, and over here we're gonna check. So let's use the if condition, first bracket and some curly brackets, and over here what we're gonna do, we're gonna check the current time of our game. So we will check if our time means the current time of our game, if it's greater than or equal to last turn time, the parameter that we created, and top of that we're gonna add the time between our turns. So we will go to look for player data, and now let's access the time between turns. Basically we just going over to this look for player data, and we accessing this parameter which is time between turns. So it's basically the duration between our turns. If that is the case, then what we can do, we can just do the first flip of our enemy. So let's do the first flip of our enemy. So we will set entity dot flip, just like that. Now we just flip the, we basically calling out the flip function, and we do know this flip function basically flipping this enemy, it's gonna be left or right. We going over to entity class, and we calling out the flip function over here, you can see, and this is responsible for flipping our enemy. And now after flipping, we need to increase amount of turns by 1 unit. So amount of turns plus plus or plus equal 1 means adding 1, it does the same thing. And also we have to set the last turn time, because we just did the turn, so we need to keep track of the turn when we did the last turn. So we're gonna set our last turn time equal to our time when we did the last time, when we did the last turn. And now we just done that thing, and we're gonna flip our enemy for the first time. And now we're gonna use the if condition once again in the bottom inside this logic update to flip our enemy once again. So let's use the if condition. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and we will check over here if if time, if it's greater than or equal to last turn time when we did the last turn. And then top of that we're gonna add the duration between our times. We do know we have to go to look for player data, and then we're gonna access time between turns. And now we're gonna check, and we will check that we will check that is turn time done if it's equals to false. And we do know that when we enter to that state, we just set it to false. You can see is turn time done equal to false, you can see. So we checking it over here, and now it's gonna be true because is turn time done, it's false. So we can just flip our enemy once again. So we can simply call out the flip function. So let's go to entity class, let's call out the flip function to flip our enemy. And now after flipping, we just gonna add, so amount of turns plus plus, we just adding once again 1. So when we flip for the first time, this amount of turns gonna be 0 plus 1, which is 1. And now amount of turn is 1, so 1 plus 1 over here gonna be 2. And now what we will do, we will set the time which is our last turn time. We will set time means when we did the last time. And after that we also need to set this is turn time done parameter to true. If we don't set, then this condition always gonna be false. So basically this over here going to be true, and we just gonna flip our enemy forever. So we need to break out this if condition. To break out, we basically need to set this is turn time done to true by now, because we just did the turn. So did the turn and the turn basically the time. So now we're gonna set is turn time equal to our true. Now this parameter is true and it's not anymore false, so this condition is not getting true. So that's why we're not gonna flip our enemy by now forever. but we want to flip once again our enemy, and we can do it, we can use another if condition in the bottom, but in doing in the top it's gonna be fine. So let's do it in the top of our logic update function, because I'm getting some error, so that's why we're doing in the top. You can do it in the bottom as well, it doesn't matter at all. So let's use the if condition once again. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. And now what we have to do, we're gonna check, firstly we will check our current time. So if time dot time, if it's greater than or equal to last turn time, and top of that we're gonna add the duration. So let's go to look for player data, time between turns, and at the same time I'm gonna check if this parameter is false, which is total turns time done. If it's false, so we will check is total turns time, if it's equals to false. At the same time we can check with that how many turns we already did. So we can use the NN condition once again, and we can check if our amount of turns, means the total turns, if it's greater than or equal to, we will go to look for player data, and then we're gonna access the total turns. If that is the case, I means we just done the all of the turns, and the turns it's already something like 2 or 3. So we will flip our enemy for the last time. So now we can simply call out the entity dot flip function to flip our enemy, and after flipping our enemy we just gonna add amount of turns. Top of this amount of turns, let's add 1 unit plus plus, and after we did also we just need to set the last turn time. So we will set last turn time equal to time dot time, to just keeping track of when we did the last time. And also we need to set back we need to set this is total turns time turn to true, else this condition just gonna be true, and our enemy just gonna flip as always forever, which we really don't want. So we're gonna set this is total turns time turn to true. So we're gonna set is total turns time equal to true. And now that's all we have to do, and we just done that thing, and we can save our script, and let's get over to Unity editor. And now we're gonna create a script called enemy1 look for player state for this first enemy. And if you have second enemy, then you can call it something like enemy2 look for player state. So let's go over to our assets. I'm gonna head over to my enemy underscore one folder. Let's right click, create mono behavior script, and you can name it to something like enemy one look for player state. If you have second enemy, then you can name it to something like enemy two look for player state. I already created a script called e1 look for player, and you can see it over here. So we're gonna open that up, and this script just gonna inherit from that look for player state class. So we're gonna take all of the properties from this class. So let's go over to our e1 look for player state, and let's remove the start and update function we don't need, and we're gonna inherit from our look for player state instead of mono behavior. And now we need to generate the constructor. So let's generate the constructor, and also we're gonna reuse those function. So let's overrides, let's generate overrides. Let's uncheck equals get hash to string, and let's rest of them we're gonna use that. And what we need a reference to our enemy one, so we can move over to a move state of this enemy, like whatever it's gonna do. If the enemy something like at the end of this ground, then this enemy need to play the ideal state. So we need a reference to our enemy one class, because in there we have all of the state we can see. So we can just move over to those state. As you can see, we have the detect state, charge state, attack state, and the list just goes on. So we need a reference to this enemy one. So let's go over to our look for player, and we can create a protected enemy one. So since we're not gonna inherit from this e1 look for player state, basically we're not gonna make any substate classes, and those classes not gonna inherit from this class. So we can simply make it private instead of doing protected, since we don't want to inherit by now, or we don't want to inherit at all from substate class. or the class we're gonna create later. It's not gonna inherit from this class. So that is the reason instead of typing protected, we can simply type private. And the script that we're looking for is enemy1. Basically we need a reference to that enemy1, so we can make the transition between our states, and we can call it something like enemy1. And we need to put it inside our constructor, so let's put it. So we're gonna type enemy1, let's call it enemy1. And now we're gonna set that. So let's set this dot enemy1 equal to our enemy1. And now we just done that, and we can just go over to logic for update function. And over here we just want to check if we just done all of the turns. So we can make a parameter for that. So we can do it over here. So let's use the if condition. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. And we do know that inside our look for player state, we created this parameter over here, which is total turns a time done. And we do know we're setting it to true once we did all of the turns and the time also done. So we're gonna use this parameter to just move over to another state. So let's go over to our e1 underscore look for player state, and we will check is total turns time done. If it's equals to true, or if we just leave like this, it's also means the same thing, means we just done the done all of the turns and also the time. So we can just move over to any state by now. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna move over to move state of this enemy. So to move over to move state of that enemy, what we need, we just gonna move over to state machine class. And now we're gonna call out the change state function, and over here we need to put the state in which state we just want to move over. So since we have enemy1 script, so if we take a quick look of enemy1 script, we can see we have all of the state. We have the move state, idle state, detect state, charge state, and the attack state. So I want to move over to this move state. So first thing, we need to go over to this enemy1 class, and after that we can just access this state you can see. So let's go over to look for player. So we firstly we're gonna go over to our enemy1 script, and now we're gonna put the state in which state we just want to move over. So we're gonna move over to move state, and now we're gonna close that up with semicolon. Let's save our script. We have to open up our player detect script, because there we just detecting our player. If it's get outside detect state of this enemy, then this enemy need to look over to it's basically need to switch over to look for player state. So that is the reason we're gonna open up that script. So let's open up our e1 player detected state script. So we already have the enemy1 script, we enemy1 class. So we can just simply make the transition. So we can just go over to this logic update, and over here we're gonna check if our player is not in detect range. Then what we're doing, we're just moving over to move state. As you can see, if our player is not in acro range, then we just moving over to move state. So instead of going basically going over to move state, this enemy need to look for our player. It means this enemy need to move over to look for player state instead of the move state. So let's remove this enemy1. So we're gonna go to enemy1 script, and we're gonna access the look for player state. But as you can see, we are not able to get that, because we need to create this state inside our enemy1 script. So for now we're gonna make this one comment, and let's open up our enemy1 script, or let's go over to enemy1 script, and we need to create the state over here, which is our look for player. And after that we can just move over to that state. So now we have to create the state. Let's create it over here. So we're gonna set a public e1, and that is look for player state, and let's call it look for player state, just like that. And now we're gonna set it. So let's go over to start function, and let's set the state. So we will set our look for player state equal to new e1 look for player state. And now this over here, this basically it's gonna take as a first argument the entity. So let's put our entity Second thing, it's gonna take the animator, so let's put our animator. And the third parameter, it's gonna take the bool name, so we will call it something like look for player. And we have to remember that when we get over to Unity editor, we just make the transition, and we have to create this parameter inside animator tab. And now it's gonna take the state machine, so let's put our state machine and look for player data. So we're gonna pass our look for player data, but we're not able to see because we need to create the data. So let's come at the top of our class, and let's create a serialized field private, and we can call this one look for player data, just like that. Sorry, look for player data, not we have to name it. You have to type this, the script name, and we're gonna call it something like look for player player data, just like that. And now we're gonna put it there, which is our look for player data. And the last argument, it's gonna take the enemy1 script, so we're gonna pass this itself. And now let's close that up with semicolon, and we just created the state. Let's save our script, and we're gonna move over to our detect state of enemy. So let's get over to this. So now we can just make the transition. So let's go over to state machine script first, and now let's call out the change state function. And now we need to put the state in which state we just want to move over. So since our player is not in min aggro range, it's basically outside of the attack range of enemy, so we can simply basically move over to look for player, because enemy just gets it outside immediately. So now, sorry, not enemy, basically player just gets immediately outside of our attack range of enemy. So that's why, so we will go to enemy one script, and now we're gonna go over to look for player state. Underneath our enemy script in the bottom, we can see look for player, and it's empty. So we need to create this asset of our look for player data. So let's go over to assets, and I will head over to my data folder, and I'm gonna create the data assets. So let's right click, and we define it the path inside our scriptable object script we do know. So let's right click there, go to create, and in the bottom I'm gonna see that. So we will go to data, sorry, this data, and we can see look for player data, and I'm gonna call this one look for player data, just like that. And my system is lagging, I really apologize. And we can see the default parameters. So the time between turns I have set 0 0.8, and the total turns I just set 2. And now we're gonna just drag the reference there. Let's take our look for data, let's drag it over to this look for player data. And now we're gonna let's see, we can make the transition. Let's play our game, and we're getting a problem. If I go over to my console tab, we can see look for player does not exist. Basically we just need to make the transition to our look for player data, and we need to create this parameter called look for player when we're gonna make the transition. So we have to do that. Let's go over to animator tab, and we can see that we have to make this. We have the state sorry, animation clip, which is look for player, and we just making the transition from this detect. So I'm gonna right click on this look for detect state of player detect state to our look for player, and we can just choose the transition, and we have to create create that parameter, which is look for player. So let's click on plus icon, then bool, and we're gonna call it look for player, just like that. And let's choose that condition. I'm gonna uncheck the has exit time, transition duration to 0. Let's click on this plus icon 2 more times. So the first parameter we will choose if player detect is false, and the second parameter I'm gonna choose if look player is true. And also we need to make the back transition from this look for player to our player detected, or else we will get stuck forever inside this look for player state of enemy. So let's make that back transition, and let's choose the back transition. We're gonna uncheck the has exit time, transition duration to 0. Let's choose two conditions. So the first condition, I'm gonna say look for player is false, and the second condition, I'm gonna say player detect is true, just like that. And we also need to make the transition to our work, because we do know that we just making the transition. If I go over to my look for player state and then go over to my sorry, e1 look for player state, we can see we just making the transition to our move state of enemy once we done all of the turns of this enemy. So that's why we're gonna make the transition from this look for player to our move enemy or walk. So let's make the transition, and let's we're gonna uncheck the has exit time, transition duration to 0. Let's click plus icon two more times. So the first condition I'm gonna choose, if look for player is false and the move parameter is true. And now we just made the transition, and we can just take a quick look, and I'm gonna just clear my console tab. And now let's click on this play button in the top in order to play our game. And let's see, we just get over to look for player, and our enemy is looking and it's basically going to the right direction. Basically we have done the mistake, and I'm gonna go over to my script once again. And if we go over to our look for player state, we can see we just flipping our enemy once again over here, you can notice. So instead of flipping for the third time, so we can just make this one come in, and enemy not gonna flip, and after that enemy just gonna move over to move state. So I'm gonna comment that, and comment basically don't interrupt our code. We can see we get over to player detect, enemy is now flapping and it's doing great. But however, if we get close enough, we can see it's attacking. But when we get out of attack range, this enemy just looking for our player, and it's working fine. Let's see, and it's really working fine. And let's see once again. I'm gonna get over to player detect of this enemy. So player is going over to detect look for player state once our enemy just outside of our, you can think of outside of our attack range of this enemy. Then this enemy just looking for our player, but once we get attack range, it's just going over detect, and then it's charging on our player and then attacking. But when we get outside, so we also need to make the transition. Basically once we can see once this enemy just attacking on our player, and if we immediately get outside of that, then enemy is not looking for our player, it's just going directly to move state of this enemy, which we really don't want. So we're gonna get out of play mode, and what we will do, we will open up the attack state where enemy is attacking. So let's go over to that script. So we're gonna open up our enemy one attack state over here. So let's suppose enemy is close enough and attack is finished, and over here we checking that is player is in max aggro range. In max aggro range means our player in attack range of enemy. And if it's not, else if our enemy is not attack range of our enemy, sorry, if player is not attack range of our enemy, then we just moving over to move state. Basically this enemy just playing the attack animation over again and again, even though if we get outside of this enemy, basically if we get far away of this enemy. So instead of going over to move state, this enemy need to look for our player. If we accidentally or suddenly we just gets outside attack range of this enemy, and we are close enough somewhere around here, so we need to move over to look for player state of this enemy. So instead of moving over to move state, now we can just make the transition for our look for player. So let's put it there. And now we need to ensure that we just made the transition from our attack to look for player. So we attacking over here, we can see. So we need to make the transition to our look for player, because we just making the transition to that state. So now let's right click on this attack state, and let's make transition to for our look for player. And let's choose the transition. We're gonna uncheck has exit time, transition duration to 0, and let's choose two condition. So the first condition, I'm gonna check if attack is false, and the second condition I'm gonna choose look for player is true, and now it's gonna do that thing. And also what we have to do, I'm gonna take talk about it later. So now let's see what's happening if we get suddenly or accidentally get outside of this enemy while this enemy is attacking on our player. Then this enemy just gonna look for our player, so let's see that. And we getting attack range, and if we get outside, we can notice this enemy just looking for our a player, we can see. And indeed it's noticing our player. And we can see that enemy is not going over to detect state once it's flipping to the right side. So we also have to do one thing, that we're gonna open up our look for player state. So let's go over to look for player state script, and over here we need to create one more parameter to just keep track of if the player suddenly get in attack range of this enemy. So we're gonna create a parameter for that. So let's create that. So we're gonna make a protected bool, and this parameter just gonna keep track of if our player in attack range of enemy or not, or max aggro range you can think of. So we're gonna call it is player in max aggro range, just like that. And now we're gonna set this parameter. Let's go over to do checks function, and over here we will set is player in max aggro range equal to entity dot check player in max aggro range. Means we just setting that. We just going over to this entity class, and we do know we just shooting out the ray. Over here we can see it's basically shooting out the ray, or you can think of that it's just taking our player if it's attack range of this enemy or not. So that parameter just doing that thing. And this function basically doing that thing, and we storing inside that inside this parameter that we created. And now let's suppose suddenly our player gets in gets you can think of gets in attack range. So we don't have to do all of these things. We're gonna stop all of these things because player in attack range, it means this enemy need to move over to detect state instead of looking for our player. We just want to do it immediately. So that's why we're gonna go over to first thing, we need to save our script. We created this parameter, that is the reason. So now we're gonna go over to e1 look for player state, and over here we're gonna check. So we will check, let's use the if condition, and we will check that is player in max aggro range. If that is the case, means we need to move over to our detect state of enemy immediately instead of looking for our player. So now we're gonna go over to state machine, then change state, basically calling out the change state function, and we need to put the state in which state we just want to move over. So since our player in attack range or in max aggro range, so we can move over to enemy detect state. So let's go to enemy one script, enemy one class, and now we're gonna go over to player detect. So let's call out the detect state, and that's it. And let's suppose the player is not in max aggro range, means enemy need to look for our player. So else if we're gonna do these things, and we have to put it over here. So make sure do this as like I'm doing. So the first thing we're checking if our player in max aggro range. If that is the case, then we're just going over to detect state of enemy. If it's not, and the total turns we already done, then we're just moving over to move state. As you can see, we're not going immediately to our look for player until and unless the total turns time is done. And if our player accidentally or suddenly gets in attack range, then we just moving over to detect state instead of flipping our enemy to the left or right and looking for our player, and it should be fine. Let's save our script. Now if we go over to animator tab, we need to make sure that we just make the transition from this detect to our look for sorry from this look for player sorry, we have to check this out. So we're making the detect state and the move state from our look for player. So we just making look for player to our detect, which is detect, and also we doing the move. So we already made the transition, we can see, so we don't have to do that. So by now we can just simply check this out. Now we can see we just get over to, but if we immediately get a detect state of this enemy, and then it's simply basically going over to detect state of this enemy from our look for player state of this enemy. We can see as soon as we get attack range of this enemy, firstly it's looking for our player. Once we get in attack range, then this enemy just going over to detect state of this enemy, and it's charging, and then it's looking for our player. Sorry, we have done some mistake, I guess. And that's it. Basically it's working fine, by the way, and we can notice, and these are final videos. So I hope you get the idea that how you can make, and we have to make sure we just make the correct transition. So that's why we just getting that weird, you can think of weird things. So we just have to stop that, and you can just play around with the code and you gonna get that how you can do it. So I hope you get the idea, and I'm gonna get out of play mode, and you have to play around with this, because we just setting all of this parameter to true or false depending upon what we're doing, and we have to check it out over here. Basically we done the mistake over here, which we checking that, and I'm gonna leave it to you, just understand this logic as I have explained. Just make sure you check the state where you're making. You have to check all of this, like inside your detect, inside your look for player, move state, idle state, and you have to check this. So I hope you get the idea how you can just make the state machine, and you can just move over to different state of your enemy, and you can reuse that code to create many enemies you want. So this is a pretty good way to practice your coding, because we can just reuse all of this state, which is look for player state. We have it over here. We can use this class in our enemy 2. If we have third enemy, then we can use it to our enemy 3, and the list just goes on. And this is the final video of this series. So I hope you get the idea, and I will see you in the next tutorial.